You are listening to episode 93 of the Overthinker's Guide to Joy. Today we're going to talk about courage, fear, and embracing failure. Let's dive in. This is a podcast for overthinkers, overdoers, and overachievers who are tired of feeling overanxious and just want to feel better. I'm your host, certified life coach, Jackie Dukrenis. Hey there, and welcome back. So today I thought I would dive into a topic that resonates with all of us, and that is courage. And courage is not just a word, it's a force that propels us beyond our comfort zone. But the interesting thing about courage is, why do so many of us lack it in certain aspects of our life? We often think that fear is the opposite of courage. But that's not entirely true. In fact, I think it's more of a spectrum. That is, they can coexist simultaneously within an individual. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the ability to confront it and then manage it in the pursuit of a greater purpose or goal. So I think in many cases, courage arises precisely because of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite feeling afraid. So, for example, a firefighter might rush into a burning building, or an individual might speak up against an injustice, and both may experience fear, but they choose to act courageously nonetheless. So let's kind of peel that onion. It's crucial to acknowledge the complexity of fear. Fear is a primal instinct wired into our brains as a survival mechanism. And it served our ancestors well when facing immediate physical threats like predators. But one reason we may lack courage is our tendency to overestimate the potential risks while underestimating our ability to cope with them. Our minds have a remarkable ability to conjure up worst-case scenarios. I think I spoke about this in several podcasts, but definitely in the Negativity Bias podcast. And what that does is it paralyzes us into inaction. So additionally, societal norms, things like peer pressure and past experiences, can shape our perception of fear, which leads us to avoid situations that challenge the status quo. So how do we overcome it? Well, overcoming fear requires a conscious effort to reframe our mindset and develop resilience. And one powerful technique is exposure therapy. That's where you gradually confront your fears in manageable doses to desensitize yourself to them. So by facing our fears head on, we can dismantle their hold over us and then build our confidence in our ability to navigate challenging situations. So this technique is often used when dealing with some of those classic fears or phobias, like fear of flying or fear of spiders or fear of heights. It's all about desensitizing the brain towards these things that are terrifying for us, but in little baby increments. But I'm actually not talking about classic fears or phobias. I'm talking about something much more subtle and actually more confronting on a daily basis. And that is fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, and fear of embarrassment. And these show up in all kinds of ways, like creating a dating profile when you're single, or finishing a creative project, or writing an email to a potential employer, or putting a post on social media, or planning a party, or applying for a new job, or asking for a raise, or having a difficult conversation with your partner. Tackling these fears can also benefit from exposure therapy, just like the classic fears or phobias. That is, practicing these skills in small but consistent ways. But how do we get started when the fear is so paralyzing? Well, the first step is self-compassion, something I talk about in almost every podcast. And that is just being kind to yourself and getting curious as to where your fears might be coming from. So perhaps there was a childhood experience that caused one of these emotions: failure, judgment, rejection, or embarrassment. Or perhaps it's just the fear of the unknown. Acknowledging that it's okay to feel afraid and then being kind to ourselves fosters inner strength and resilience. Okay, so what's the next step? After we get in touch with the fears and become sort of private investigators about where are they coming from, what is the past experience that has caused this fear, or what did we see or what were we told that created this fear? So what's the next step after we get in touch with our fears? Well, it's to create or find a supportive network. This can be friends, family, or mentors. They just need to encourage and uplift us. And then that can provide the emotional scaffolding we need to take bolder steps forward with. Now, when I first became a coach, I was afraid of all things marketing. I was fearless about coaching. I loved it. I was good at it. I felt confident in it. But the marketing of being an entrepreneur or the marketing of coaching was just terrifying to me. I was afraid to post on social media. I was afraid to send out weekly newsletters. I was afraid to do this podcast. My fears ran the gamut. And they were based on the fact that I was afraid of doing it wrong. And I was afraid that the technology was unfamiliar and I would screw it up. And I was afraid that I'd embarrass myself. Or I was afraid that I would be bothering people. And that paralyzed me. But then I had an awesome assistant who helped me through the tech. And then I had several coaching friends support me in how I chose to create content and market myself. And while I was looking at other coaches and other business owners on Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives or doing TikToks, I was like, well, that's just not me. I can't do it, or I don't want to do it, or it's just not who I am. I spent my entire former career behind the camera, so the thought of getting in front of the camera was enough to make me want to go back to bed and pull the covers over my head. But what I learned was I really liked writing and I really liked podcasting. Although, admittedly, that was scary too. But then this magical thing happened. Just by showing up every week to write a blog or do a podcast, I started to become more brave. And the interesting thing that happened was that clients, friends, and even strangers started reaching out to me to tell me how much they enjoyed those newsletters and podcasts. Some would tell me they would reread what I wrote, and some would re-listen to the episodes. And then they would recommend or share it with their friends. And slowly, my fears started to subside and my courage started to emerge. Now, if I'm being honest, I still get nervous every week when I sit down to write a blog post or craft a podcast, but I try to focus on serving others, and that keeps me out of the paralysis. But look, despite our best efforts, various factors can sabotage our courage. One of the most common culprits is the fear of failure. Our society so stigmatizes failure as something to be ashamed of, and they overlook it as a potential or catalyst for growth. The fear of judgment or ridicule can deter us from taking risks and trap us in a cycle of conformity and stagnation. And then there's one of my favorite saboteurs, perfectionism, also known as the silent killer of courage. The relentless pursuit of flawlessness sets impossibly high standards, leading to procrastination and avoidance of challenges to avoid potential failure. So it's crucial to recognize that courage is not about being perfect, but it's about showing up authentically and embracing vulnerability. And most importantly, it's about consistency. So another way to shift our mindset away from perfectionism is to learn to embrace failure. I'm going to caution you here for 1 second. Don't confuse embracing failure with self-sabotage. There is a difference between avoidance, paralysis, self-sabotage, or trying to fail. Embracing failure is different. When someone embraces failure, they see failure not as an end, but as a natural part of the learning process and personal growth. It's basically 5 pillars. The first is learning opportunity. Every setback is a chance to learn. And instead of dwelling on the negative aspects of failure, individuals who embrace failure focus on what went wrong and how they can improve it in the future. The second is resilience. Rather than being discouraged by setbacks, individuals who embrace failure bounce back stronger. They understand that failure is temporary and that the perseverance is key to eventual success. Think of the image of a rubber band being stretched farther backwards, only to launch further forwards. Okay, the third pillar, innovation. Failure often precedes innovation. By experimenting and pushing boundaries, we increase our chances of discovering new ideas and solutions. Let's take Apple's first attempt at the personal digital assistant called the Newton. Some of you probably never even heard of it. In 1993, I think it was released, and by 1997, it was completely shut down as a total failure. But the Newton's failure prompted Apple to rethink its approach to mobile devices, which led to the development of the iPhone, which revolutionized the smartphone industry. Okay, number 4. When failure is embraced, the fear diminishes. All right, let's take Thomas Edison, for example. He held over 1,000 patents. He had inventions ranging from the phonograph to the incandescent light bulb to the motion picture camera to alkaline storage batteries. However, Edison also experienced many failures throughout his career, including numerous unsuccessful attempts to developing a practical electric light bulb before he finally succeeded. All right, what's the 5th? Personal growth. Embracing failure allows individuals to confront their weaknesses, adapt to change, and develop new skills. Over time, this continuous cycle of learning and improvement leads to greater self-awareness and fulfillment. In other words, we become more confident in the process of failure. How weird is that? So the question is, why are some people more brave than others? Are they just born with it? Well, it turns out that genetics and personality traits may play a role. It's essential to recognize that courage is a skill that can be cultivated and honed over time. One factor that distinguishes courageous individuals is their ability to reframe fear as an opportunity for growth. So instead of viewing challenges as insurmountable obstacles, they see them as stepping stones towards personal development and fulfillment. It's those same 5 pillars of embracing failure. Seeing it as a learning opportunity, resilience, innovation, personal growth, and reducing fear. So courage flourishes in environments that nurture autonomy. That doesn't mean being alone or being always individualistic. It's just saying it's okay to do it your way. And by having a support system, whether that's at work or at home or wherever, by embracing that autonomy, you are more likely to be braver and more likely to step into that courageous mindset. So I think it bears repeating. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. So by understanding the roots of our fears, practicing self-compassion, and embracing failure, we can learn to overcome our fears and cultivate courage. When we step out of our comfort zones and live boldly, we allow the spark of courage to ignite. And one of my favorite thoughts when embarking on a courageous act is that you might be the solution to someone else's problem, whether that's falling in love, getting a new job, opening lines of communication, or letting someone know that you have an expertise they need. So let people know that you're here and that you have something to offer, and be courageous. So your homework for this week is to take one small step forward on that thing that you've been so afraid of, but you know you really want to conquer it. And if you need my help, reach out to me and let's talk about working together. All right, friends, as always, I thank you for listening and I look forward to talking to you next time. Have an awesome week. Bye for now. If you would like to learn more about working with me as a coach, you can connect with me through my website at JackieDeGrenis.com. That's JackieDeGrenis.com.